When one talks about the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council having, of course, the obligations really of promoting international peace and security around the world, when you figure that you come from a country like Ivory Coast, which obviously has, until recently, one of the largest peacekeeping missions on the ground, how do you grade it if one were to ask you for a report card?
About the United Nations?
Yes.
Briefly, when people make an analysis about the United Nations, I think people forget that the international affairs are dominated by the realist theory, according to which might is right. So, and second, we have to go back to the Berlin Conference when Africa was partitioned, and then later on, Africa experienced more than 70 years of colonization.
Partitioned, but without any African individual sitting on the table
there.
in Berlin.
Africa was not present, and then for the European powers and gathered, and then they decided, to give themselves like parts of Africa to colonize. So when African countries gained independence in the 60s, in the aftermath then of the African independence, Africa has to experience what people call neocolonialism. Like the former colonizers were still involved in African affairs. So now we notice that France and Britain, who were two major players in African affairs during the colonial time, are permanent members in the Security Council. And then, of course, we have the United States of America, and we have China and Russia. And then we also have to take into account the context of Cold War, during which the West and the East were fighting, and Africa became a battleground. So when we come to the United Nations, and we credit for preserving the lives of many, we notice that African countries have to go through the former colonizers when they want to have their voices heard on the international scene. And I think that that's not fair, and that's my position. And then that's why all those African leaders are calling for the reform of the United Nations institution.
So basically, Africa really needs to have representation.
Yeah, Africa needs to have a representation.
All of the Security Council.
The whole continent of Africa, more than 50 countries, doesn't have a single representative like in the Security Council. And I think that things should change.
The population is in fact estimated to be about 1 billion people.
Yeah, 1 billion people and more than 50 countries.
But it has no voice.
No voice like at the United Nations. For instance, we take the example of Ivory Coast, the case I think I know the most. During the crisis, everybody knows that France was involved, or is still involved, in the crisis, and France sheltered the rebels. And then when the resolution of the United Nations was supposed to be drafted, they have to be drafted by France, in New York, to talk about a crisis in which the government of France is accused of attempting to topple the president. And then, of course, so we can understand, why people say that, those resolutions were biased against the president. People did not want to see in the first place.